Hello, and thank you for joining our Teaching for 21st Century webinar brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and Glazov Gang. I'm your host, Annie Cyrus. Please use the Q&A box on your screen if you have any questions, and I promise we will answer them as soon as our very special guest presentation is over. With that being said, it is always my privilege to introduce our speaker this evening, Robert Spencer. He's the director of Jihad Watch, is also a Shellman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and is an author of 21 books. I think I could say 22, soon to be his brand new book ready for pre-order, Did Mohammed Exist? Hi, Robert.
Hi, Andy. Good to see you. It's 23 now.
Oh, my very bad. I'm sorry. 23.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, thank you all for being here. And we are going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, Nancy Pelosi, or I believe it was Kurt Schlichter who indelibly dubbed her Granny Boxwine. And the question at hand tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning, wherever you may be, is what she said the other day about what she said were the root causes of the January 6th, what she called insurrection. Of course, it was not an insurrection, but merely a lot of people who were invited into the Capitol with the police opening the doors. You can see the photographs, they're readily available. The full story of what happened on January 6th has not been told, and it's not particularly our subject this evening, but it is noteworthy that it's not an insurrection and that she is trying to portray it as such. But what she said was that the root causes were, and I quote, the white supremacy, the anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia, all the rest of it that was so evident when you see a sweatshirt on one of the people saying Camp Auschwitz. Now, you know, that seems to me like it's right out of the left's paranoid fantasies of what conservatives are really like. I have been moving in and among people who dissent from the left's agenda for how many years now, 30 some years now, and never have I've met some anti-Semites, to be sure, but never any that gleefully celebrated the mass murder of Jews. I'm not saying such people don't exist. Of course, there's Nick Fuentes out there and his followers comparing the Holocaust victims to cookies being baked in an oven and so on. So I'm not at all saying that this kind of thing is impossible, but just that for her to characterize the entire group of people who were there to protest against what is fairly obvious and increasingly documented election fraud as just a bunch of revolting hate mongers, anti-Semites and so-called Islamophobes, it's ridiculous, but it's more than ridiculous. It manifests her agenda. And that is what we are concerned about tonight. When she says that the root causes of this so-called insurrection were white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia, she is not just saying crazy stuff or calling names. She is giving us her to-do list. What she is going to do now is attempt to scapegoat people that she characterizes as white supremacists, anti-Semites, and Islamophobes as being responsible for the January 6th alleged insurrection. Now, how this works has been made clear by a few other people. One was the former CIA station chief for Pakistan and Afghanistan. His name is Robert Grenier. And last February, he was on some shows and he said some very interesting things about this alleged white supremacist insurrection threat. He said, you know, even at the seeming height of the crisis, immediately after 9/11, there really weren't that many members of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And the thrust of our campaign there was, yes, to hunt down Al-Qaeda, but primarily to remove the supportive environment in which they were able to live and flourish. Did you hear that? the supportive environment in which they were able to live and flourish. Robert Grenier, as they say nowadays, he said the quiet part out loud there, and he gave away what is the agenda that the left is going to pursue. I keep quoting David Horowitz's famed adage that is at the top of frontpagemagazine.com. I'm quoting it practically daily now because it is so applicable. When I first saw it, I'll tell you, when I first saw it go up on front page, I thought, well, that's a cute phrase, but it's a little bit overstated. You know the one I'm talking about. Inside every liberal is a totalitarian screaming to get out. And I thought it was a bit overstated, I'll tell you, but the more every day that goes by, it looks like, oh yes, well, here they are screaming to get out and now they're getting out. It was absolutely true all along. And so this is how it works. First, they characterize their enemies by these false characterizations. They hang these labels on those they hate. White supremacists. There probably are some white supremacists out there. I understand the KKK does actually exist. Probably there are a few losers somewhere who are actually members of it, but it's a negligible force. And anti-Semites. There are a lot of anti-Semites out there. Quite a lot of them are the Muslim friends and allies of Nancy Pelosi, notably Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib right in the House of Representatives. But in terms of the supporters of the most pro-Israel president in the history of the United States, not so much in any realistic sense. And Islamophobes, of course, Islamophobia is a propaganda term that was invented in order to intimidate people into thinking that it was wrong to oppose jihad terrorism. But let's remember that none of these labels remotely apply to the people who were at the Capitol on January 6th. Maybe a couple of exceptions here and there, but those people were there to protest election fraud. Election fraud does not have any intrinsic connection or extrinsic connection to white supremacism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. And of course, Nancy Pelosi thinks of all the supporters of Trump as white supremacists, anti-Semites, and Islamophobes. And that's exactly my point, that it's an Alinskyite tactic. First, you hang these odious labels on the people. And then the other shoe drops, and that is that the people who carry these labels have to be dealt with, silenced, deplatformed, perhaps even their behavior criminalized if they can get away with it, such that there is only Nancy Pelosi and her colleagues left to have any voice in the public discourse at all. Now, we've already seen this happen in terms of the word extremist. The word extremist probably, I don't know its etymology, it's probably been around for a long time. And I'm not saying that it was coined after 9/11, but it was really only after 9/11 that we started to hear about extremists. And even then, we didn't hear about extremists right away. We heard about terrorists. And then what happened was, there were people who were saying that you can't really talk about terrorists. It's Islamophobic. It implies, if you say Islamic terrorist, that all Muslims are terrorists. And so instead of saying terrorist, you should say extremist. And the Obama administration went all in on this. George W. Bush, of course, started the ball rolling, saying Islam is a religion of peace and all that nonsense. But then Obama actually replaced the language that Bush had devised and his people had devised about the war on terror with a war on extremism. He actually called his program that very scrupulously and carefully did not make any mention of Islam and jihad in connection with terrorism. And he called it the Countering Violent Extremism Program. Now, nobody really realized the implications of that, and I think most people still don't, but they're just now coming clear. Right around the same time that the Obama administration devised this counter-extremism program, the Southern Poverty Law Center began to label opponents of the left's agenda as extremists. Even now, if you Google my name, which I don't recommend, but if you were to do it, the first thing that will come up, because of course Google is part of this leftist cabal that's trying to control the public discourse and stigmatize and demonize anybody who dissents from their agenda. The first thing that comes up is the Southern Poverty Law Center's extremism file about me, and I'm by no means alone in this. But the fact that it is extremism files is the point here. Now, speaking for myself, I've never obviously called for any violence, planned any violence, approved of any violence. I want to see legal remedies to the jihad terror threat. I want to see legal counters to the spread of Sharia provisions that are oppressive to women and so on. There's nothing extremist about that. But by labeling us extremists, then you see we come into the purview of the Countering Violent Extremism program. Now, the Obama administration never let that other shoe drop, although it was close a few times. But now comes the time for it all to be brought back home. It's all being tied together now. That Robert Grenier, the CIA guy, says, we have to fight this threat the way we fought Al-Qaeda. We didn't just fight Al-Qaeda by going after Al-Qaeda. We fought Al-Qaeda by going after the supportive environment in which they operated. So that's the same thing here, you see. They're going to go after the supportive environment in which the January 6th insurrectionists operated. That's us. The white supremacists, the anti-Semites, the Islamophobes. No, we're not any of those things, but they've already labeled us with all that. And the extremists, they've already labeled David Horowitz and me and so many other people with this label. And so now the Biden administration is partnering with the Southern Poverty Law Center to go after what it calls domestic extremists. Well, it's very clear what's going to happen. And so that's what Granny Boxwine is talking about when she says that we got to get to the root causes of the white supremacy, the anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia that caused this January 6th riot, this insurrection, as far as she's concerned. What she's saying is, essentially, we're going to hang these labels on conservatives, and then we're going to silence them and criminalize them if we can get away with it. And of course, there's been quite a lot of indication that this was what was coming. It's not as if they're not telling us what is in the offing. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, with a name like that, he ought to be a bullfighter or a great actor or something. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but Alejandro Mayorkas, he said, the lethal and persistent terrorism-related threat today is domestic ideologically motivated extremism. Domestic ideologically motivated extremism, once again, that's us. The idea is that the threat landscape, as it's called, has been evolving such that the problem is no longer Al-Qaeda, the problem is no longer ISIS, the problem is us. And as a matter of fact, Bill Bratton, the former police commissioner in New York City, he said this also recently as well. For the last 20 years, our biggest concern was international terrorism, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. But now, he said, it's here and it's us. He said that. It's here and it's us. It's the citizens of the United States, some of whom are rebelling against everything we thought we believed in for the last 300 or 400 years. Well, actually, Bill, I do believe in those things. I'm not so sure you do. But the idea of the freedom of speech, the idea of the equality of rights of all people before the law, all these things and more are severely threatened. And they are threatened by people who are claiming that those who want to defend them are an imminent threat to the Republic, and that as a result, they have to be silenced. This January 6th incident is, of course, being used as the pretext to do that. Just like the Nazis used the Reichstag fire. Just in case you don't know, the Reichstag fire was February 27th, 1933. The Reichstag, the German parliament building, went up in flames, and a young communist, a Dutch communist, Marinus van der Lubbe, was found in the building, and he was, according to some accounts, pouring gasoline on the floor and lighting rags on fire and things like that. And the Nazis immediately saw their opportunity. Some say the Nazis themselves lit the fires. That wouldn't be in the least outside the realm of possibility, but it has never been proven. The fire itself, however, was an extraordinary opportunity for them. They were able to blame the Communist Party, which was a significant political party in Germany at the time, and outlaw it and bar all of them from parliament. And then as a result, after they were all barred from parliament, then the Nazis had an absolute majority and were able to pass laws that made Hitler into a dictator who didn't need to listen to the parliament at all. Now, how close that couldn't happen here, right? Well, as a matter of fact, there was recently an FBI agent who was interviewed on one of the leftist networks, and he said that we have to follow this January 6th insurrection trail wherever it may lead, and that may include the arrests of members of Congress. It's exactly like the Reichstag fire in Germany in 1933. If they end up, and they will do it if they think they can get away with it, that if they end up arresting the leading Republicans in Congress, then there's absolutely no chance of opposing their agenda. And also the arrests themselves will be on the basis by which they will be able further to criminalize dissent in the United States. Now, this would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. This would have been absolutely outside all the realms of possibility. Nobody would have thought that even the American left would go so far as to try to destroy the very foundations of the Republic. And yet, it seems to me to be increasingly obvious that that's what they're going to at least try to do. Whether or not they will succeed is another matter. But they're pretty open about what's going on here and what they intend to do. I should also note that there are other precedents as well for Pelosi hanging us with those false labels, the white supremacism, the anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia. If you read the Gulag Archipelago of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, you will find that there's a time where there was actually a revolt of the prisoners in the Gulag. Now, when you're in the Gulag, it was pretty severe, and the revolt was short-lived, and it never had much of a chance of succeeding. But what was noteworthy to me, among other things in it, was that there were some people who were saying to the jailers, to the Soviet prison guards, will you please stop calling us fascists? We are not fascists. Solzhenitsyn himself had fought for the Soviet army against the Nazis during World War II. So a lot of them thought that it was offensive that they would be called this when they were actually loyal citizens who had been caught up in the basic insanity of Stalinist tyranny. And what the prisoners didn't understand was that calling them fascists was the justification for having them in prison. You see, without the pretext, then the naked tyranny of the whole thing would have been obvious. So they had to keep calling them fascists, even if you've got decorated soldiers in the Soviet army, because not to call them fascists would be to give away that the whole thing was a cruel game and a cruel joke to begin with. It's just like the Islamic Republic of Iran sentences people to being an enemy of Islam and an enemy of Allah, and you go to prison for that in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, that's a Quranic designation that you are striving to cause corruption in the land, which is a very common charge in the Islamic Republic of Iran, that you're an enemy of Allah and his messenger, and so on. So you see, though, that that's such a nebulous charge that you can catch up pretty much anybody in it if you want to. And you can portray pretty much anything they might do or any number of things that they might have done as being indication that they are enemies of Allah. And it's really the same thing now that we're seeing with the left today in the United States. There are hardly any real white supremacists, and yet everything is white supremacist. Everything is racist. I don't know if you saw on Twitter the other day, it was very funny, but it was also chilling. Somebody said, write any word in the comments box and I will find you some leftist saying it's racist. And people were saying things like oxygen. And then you found some clown saying that air quality is worse in high minority areas or things like that, you know, absolutely insane analyses that had no basis in reality to show that air is racist, water is racist, walking is racist, food is racist, everything is racist. But that justifies then the punitive measures that are likely to be in the offing. And that's what's chilling about it. That once you can smear large segments of the population with these labels, then you can use the labels to take care of these dangerous extremists. Now note also that when Alejandro Mayorkas and all the other ones say that the white supremacists are the biggest threat in the United States today, they don't have any white supremacists to back that up. It's interesting. Watch when you see the articles, because there's a steady stream of articles now. Just watch the news sites over the next week and you'll see one saying that white supremacists are the biggest terror threat in America today. But I guarantee you they won't list any terror operations carried out by white supremacists. They'll name January 6th, which is a highly questionable incident, and they'll name maybe Oklahoma City bombing, which was what, 1995? 26 years ago? You have jihad terrorists if you read Jihad Watch, and if you don't, why don't you? But if you have jihad terrorists pretty much all the time on a regular basis, plotting attacks in the United States, carrying out attacks elsewhere. They will carry out attacks here the longer the Biden administration goes on. And they certainly have done so in the past. And yet we're constantly told that the jihad terror threat is far less important than the white supremacist threat. But they don't have any white supremacists to back it up. And that's where we come in. Not that we're white supremacists, but we're going to be pressed into this role so that the left can use us, scapegoating us, smearing us, and defaming us to use us to silence all of their opposition and to carry out to hold their hegemony unchallenged. That's what Nancy Pelosi was saying when she said that the root causes of the January 6th insurrection were white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. So I hope that this has made clearer to you what is going on, and that you can try to bring all pressure you possibly can upon any elected officials you may have who might be remotely sane or susceptible to pressure in this regard, to resist these measures by any means that they possibly can. I'm talking about legal means, of course, and to point out that when Pelosi and company say that Trump is a threat to our democracy and that our sacred democracy, it's the cynicism and hypocrisy of these people. It's just astounding. But our sacred democracy is under threat from the right. They are actually the threat to it. And we don't actually have a democracy. Of course, we have a republic. They are the foremost threat to the republic. And this is how they are doing it. And so I thank all of you extremists for being here. I hope you will stay vigilant and stay strong. It's going to be a tough few years, but well, we don't stand to lose anything by surrendering. Remember what Sharb, the editor of Charlie Hebdo, said, "I'd rather die standing up than live on my knees." And well, maybe we can also live standing up for a while as well. Thank you very much. I have a few questions I see here. Should I just go through them, Annie, or what do you want to do?
That is completely up to you. If you like me to read them to you, I can do that. If you want to just read them.
I have them right here. So
perfect.
With conservatism essentially outlawed and an elected president having been undermined by the deep state, is the USA still capable of returning to its small state personal liberty origins in its current form? Yes and no. I hope so. Certainly, as you have noted, the rot is very deep. And also, this is this huge conglomerate now. We're very far from our small state personal liberty origins. However, the fact that all this has happened has awakened so many people to what's going on that I think we have a better shot at returning to our small state personal liberty origins now than we did, say, 5 to 10 years ago. Not only the Trump presidency was a great sign of hope, but also, paradoxically enough, the downfall and defeat of the Trump presidency. And I do not mean electoral defeat. I mean defeat by the deep state, defeat by these plotters who essentially carried out their own insurrection against an elected president. Excuse me. And so that has awakened a great part of the American public, and this is by no means over. My native state, South Carolina's state motto is worth keeping in mind: Dum spiro spero, while I breathe, I hope. It's pretty clear that what happened on January 6th was a smokescreen that federal law enforcement probably participated in. I do think that's quite right. That's quite reasonable that in light of the multiple pictures I've seen of the police opening the doors for the protesters, leading the protesters into the building and so on. This was a very clumsily done false flag operation, but does seem to be one. Is there any possibility of getting an actual investigation into what happened before the 2022 elections? I would doubt that. And I don't even know if we're going to have 2022 elections that are free and fair without that kind of investigation. All the hope right now is in the audits. And if the Arizona audit shows that Trump won Arizona, that could trigger audits in other places, and then the whole situation could change. If we have to wait that long, how do we make sure that those who orchestrated the event actually pay for their crimes? I don't even have a hope of that, tell you the truth. Certainly that would be the best case scenario. But these people have so many friends and protectors in high places that I'm not waiting for Hunter Biden or Hillary Clinton or any of these people to go to prison. I just want them to stop putting their boot on our faces. And if we can beat back to some degree their hegemony in Washington, then we'll have done a great deal right there. And there might be a chance for America to continue as a free society. For quite a while now, I've thought that January 6th was a false flag operation, yes, and members of Congress were complicit, very likely. A big problem appears to be corruption within the FBI. Some people even believe members of the FBI were involved in the incident. Would you agree? I couldn't possibly agree more. I'll tell you, I used to say this, people said I'm crazy. And now Tucker Carlson's talking about it. So I don't think people think I'm as crazy as they used to. Well, maybe they do, but that's another story. The fact is that in May 2015, I was co-sponsor and co-organizer with Pamela Geller of the infamous Muhammad Art Exhibit and Cartoon Contest in Garland, Texas. And we were trying to stand up for the freedom of speech and show that we would not submit to violent intimidation. You may know that a couple of ISIS operatives came from Phoenix, drove 8 hours from Phoenix to Garland, Texas, in order to kill us all. And we had hired quite a lot of security, and they were killed in the parking lot as they were drawing their rifles or whatever they had. In any case, the FBI had an informant or an undercover officer who was in communication with Ibrahim Simpson and Nadir Sufi, the two ISIS guys from Phoenix who came to kill us. And not only was he in communication with them, he encouraged them. He wrote to them, "Tear up Texas," in connection with their plans to come to Texas and commit mass murder at our event. Not only did he encourage them, he was driving into the parking lot in the car right behind them. Not only did he follow them right into the parking lot of our event, but then he took a photograph, this undercover FBI agent, of the security agent who was actually shot, not seriously wounded, by the jihadis before they were killed. but he took the picture before they shot the guy. How did he know which one to take a picture of? I don't know, but I do know the FBI knows. And the FBI has continuously misled and stonewalled about what they know. They did not, notice what they did not do. They knew this was coming. They knew these guys were going to come and shoot the place up or try, but they didn't send anybody but this one undercover agent. Maybe there was another guy inside, that may be. But look, if I were an FBI agent and I heard that there was going to be an ISIS attack at an event, I would have 100 operatives at the event, ringing the building, making sure they couldn't get anywhere near getting inside. The FBI had none of that. The FBI knew that these guys were going to hit, and they didn't tell our security people. So it was not hard to come to the conclusion, in light of all that, that they wanted this to happen for whatever reason. Remember, Barack Obama was president at that time, and he said, the future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. And there we were holding an event featuring images of the Prophet of Islam, which many Muslims don't like. And so maybe the Obama administration wanted to make an example out of us and show, see what happens? The future must not belong and does not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. This is what happens to these people. Don't let this happen to you. Don't offend them. Don't draw Muhammad. Retreat from the freedom of speech, and then everything will be okay. Or as Muhammad Atta, the 9/11 hijacker, said, stay quiet and you'll be okay. Now, in light of all that, I do not have a very high view of the FBI. I think the FBI was trying to set us up to get killed. Is that really all that far-fetched now that we know about what the FBI did to try to frame Trump for collusion with the Russians and to have him removed from office on false pretenses? I wouldn't put anything past those guys. And this is the big problem the United States has right now, that we have the FBI and the CIA, and they are essentially running themselves and running the country the way they want it. And anybody that gets in their way like Trump did, they destroy. What we need is a strong enough popular reaction to these agencies that we can get a president in who's strong enough and has enough support to actually dismantle these agencies and start over. The United States got along without the CIA until after World War II, and the FBI until, what was it, the 1920s or 30s. So we don't need them now, and we shouldn't have them. Nancy Pelosi is 81 years old, like the mullahs of Iran. Well, I don't know if they're all 81. But anyway, is it possible that all these terrorists in power will just get old and die and everything will get better? I think it's actually very likely that they'll get old and die. I think it's virtually certain. The problem, of course, in all seriousness, is that there will be others coming after them. I mean, the problem, of course, now with Joe Biden pretending to be president of the United States, and he's very old and he's obviously not well. Maybe he will die in the near future, but then Kamala Harris is only, what, in her 50s? And so it's, I mean, these people are desperately corrupt. And they do have a bit of a problem in that the people coming after them, the people of the next generation, don't seem to have the abilities that they do to give the appearance of moderation and to try to garner large amounts of support from the mainstream. And so I think that's one reason why they're hanging on. And the other reason is that they're desperately corrupt and they like all the money flowing in. You know, it's just one of the biggest and most unremarked scandals in American politics today is that you have the richest counties in the United States right around Washington, D.C. And who lives there? The people who are bureaucrats in Washington. Why are they the richest people in the country? Because there are forces that are lining their pockets to get them to do what they want. And that's true also of politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who had millions of dollars, even though there's no way, even if she never spent a penny of her congressional salary, that she would have been able to amass that amount. but obviously with the job come all the people who will come around and find ways to give you large amounts of money and get you to do their bidding. And all this has to be cleared out. But even the people of the, I mean, I think the establishment Republicans show no interest in clearing it out because they're in on it too. They're all at the same trough. I keep hearing Trump is coming back in July, August, September. I think many friends are setting themselves up for false hope. Is he coming back soon? I don't see any way that could possibly happen. The Constitution speaks about the vice president becoming the president if the president dies or becomes unable to carry out the responsibilities of the office. And then the new president, according to, is it the 25th Amendment as well? In any case, according to an amendment of the Constitution that was actually only formulated and passed in the 1960s, the president appoints a new vice president subject to the approval of the Senate. And that's how we got Gerald Ford. After Spiro Agnew resigned, Nixon appointed Gerald Ford vice president, and then Ford became president when Nixon resigned over Watergate, and Ford chose Nelson Rockefeller as vice president. Both Ford and Rockefeller were kind of Romneyite McCain Republicans who were chosen because the Democrats controlled the Senate. And so they were the only ones who could get approved. So what you're talking about is that even if it were proven that the election was stolen, and that Trump won the election, which seems to me to be very likely, there's no mechanism in the Constitution to deal with that eventuality. It just doesn't exist. And so they would have to make one up. And you would have to have people of goodwill on both sides to do that. And so presumably if Joe Biden is still president by then, that he would have to resign and Kamala resign after appointing Trump so that he would become president. Now, how likely is it that Biden and Harris, even if they were shown to have stolen the election, are going to do something like that? There's no way. The electoral votes were certified, and that's all that you need. The electoral votes are what really elect the president, not the popular vote and not vote audits in Arizona. So the vote audits in Arizona may show that the electoral votes were wrongly cast, but they've already been approved and there's no mechanism for disapproving them. So I don't think Trump's coming back. I'm sorry. Maybe in 2024, but not before then. There's no way that could happen. I mean, unless somehow popular opinion maybe makes it impossible for Biden and Harris to continue, and there's an overwhelming groundswell of people demanding that they resign after appointing Trump vice president, and then he becomes president and so on. But don't hold your breath. We're not dealing with people who want to play by the rules, and there aren't even any rules in this regard. We're not dealing with people who want to play fair. We're not dealing with decent, upstanding people. We're dealing with totalitarians, communists, liars, deeply, desperately corrupt individuals who've lined their pockets at the expense of the American people. They're enemies of the state in the fullest sense, although they really are the state. They run the state, but they've stolen it, not just the election. And so I wouldn't expect any goodwill from them or any decent behavior. Any others?
Yes, you have 3 new questions that came in.
Oh, okay, here we go. Thank you, Annie. Youth is being indoctrinated throughout the Western world to accept the maddest of ideologies. Yeah, ain't that the truth? I think this is one of the root causes of the current sad situation of our societies. Luckily, parents are currently rising up against CRT racism. Do you see any hope of reform in the education system in your country? If not, what can people do to deal with this? Well, this is the problem. There are parents rising up, but you're still talking about individuals here and there. It's great that they're rising up. I hope more do, but many more would have to for this to be turned around. These people are determined to implement this communist indoctrination and this critical race theory that would cause such deep divisions that they would definitely lead to violence and unrest in the United States. This is what they want because that's how they come to power. and solidify their hegemony. But it's not going to be just one or two parents here and there. There have to be really a whole school district's worth of parents that stand up and say they're not going to take this. They're not going to allow this. And unfortunately, still, we have large numbers of people who they come home from work and they watch CNN and they don't realize just how bad things really are. Or they're just glad that that fellow with his mean tweets is out of the White House. I don't see any legal means of President Trump returning to power prior to 2024. You're right, unfortunately. If the audit in Arizona shows massive fraud and others follow, would the states involved be able to replace Senate and House members based on corrected results? This should be the push going forward. It would all be new. Anything could happen, but it would all be new. There is no mechanism to deal with anything like this. I don't think it's, oh, I said that, sorry. Oh, it's no, I didn't say that. It's just the same thing twice. I don't think it's possible for Trump to be reinstated in power before 2024 to replace either Biden or Harris. But what about the idea of us negotiating? The Democrats must pay for the crime by being required to forfeit the 2024 election to whichever Republican wins the primary. Well, like I say, I don't think we're dealing with decent and honorable people. And so don't expect them to do us any favors. Is the 2022 election perhaps the last hope of our constitutional republic? Not just perhaps, it really is. And so we can only hope that there will be enough pushback against the obvious fraud that they will not be able to get away with it this time. If they do, then we might as well forget it, because they'll be able to just elect Democrat after Democrat, and we won't be able to do anything about it. So thanks so much, everyone. I'm sorry for the bleak notes of this, but remember, doom sparrow, sparrow, while I breathe, I hope. This ain't over. And there are so many people waking up every day. Things could turn around in unexpected fashion.
May I ask you a question, Robert?
Sure.
So you said the cat is out of the bag. We know the real agenda behind Pelosi and her gang. I call the Democrat Party Pelosi's gang.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, now, will they achieve it or not is a different story.
Yes.
What do you think? Will they achieve it?
No, I don't think so. Because I don't think they're going to be able to make Americans think that there is some massive white supremacist threat constituting millions of people whose only manifestation of this white supremacist threat is that they support Trump and they don't support the Biden administration and Biden's handlers. I think there's going to be increasing difficulty they're going to have in putting forward that message as this initiative advances, and Merrick Garland and the rest of them prosecute more of the January 6th political prisoners who are still being held without trial, and the agenda becomes more obvious that they're going after what the CIA guy said was the support network of these supposed insurrectionists. And as it becomes clear that those are just ordinary Americans, then I think it's going to crash and burn. I live in hope. We'll see.
Right. That's the thing. You mentioned Iran, and you're very correct. They just, first of all, you're guilty until proven not guilty. Secondly, there are so many accusations they will just throw it out at you. And I guess my concern with this agenda is, first of all, they're making also the rules and regulations, and they just pass it between them. They're celebrated. What is to stop them from doing exactly what, let's say, all Islamic countries do, which is you're accused, you're thrown in prison, wait your term, years until you're tried. I hate to say this, but seeing how Islamic attack pushed Americans back to not speak out, what is it to stop Americans to fight back against something like this? What if they just bow to that one too, out of fear?
A lot of people are going to bow out of fear. And that's why nobody knows how this is going to work out. But I think that you're dealing in Iran with a country without a democratic tradition. Whereas in the United States, we do have a democratic tradition, and there are a lot of people who not only remember what it was like, but they're stoutly willing to defend that tradition and defend the idea of freedom. And so you could start having large numbers of people thrown into prison without trial. I mean, of course, we already have that to some degree. But the more they do this, the more they're going to come up against people who don't believe that this is how America has ever operated and are willing to stand up and fight for the old America. We'll see. I'm not saying, oh, it's in the bag, we're going to win, but we may not lose.
No, I agree. I always love what you say. It's not over until it's over, and it isn't over yet. That I agree, but I think bottom line is bottom line. We are on our own, we the people, the American. There is absolutely no hope. Anyone in the government, Republican, Democrat, anyone, they're just not going to do anything about it. Or
Yeah,
am I over exaggerating?
no, you're right. And so there's one more question in that connection. What is the most effective thing we can do now to wake more people up and get them involved? Tell them all the things I was just telling you.
Oh
And
no,
I
just look
gave
at
you,
your hard work. I kid you not, Robert. I have found a way to be effective at spreading your articles. You're
oh yeah,
heavily shadow banned on Facebook.
yes,
So what I do, seriously, everyone, our audience, do this. I copy the title of the article and post it as just the text on my Facebook, and then on the first comment, I leave a link to Jihad Watch.
oh,
I've
that's
been
great,
able to get a lot of interaction. So actually,
great.
go to Jihad. I do it every morning. Jihad Watch, copy title, post on Facebook, put the link on the comments.
Thank you. But that's the thing, we have to raise awareness. And I gave you a lot of quotes. Those quotes, people would be surprised if they heard that they're talking openly, essentially, about going after ordinary people. And so take these out to as many people as you can. Show them, be obnoxious at work, whatever. The stakes are everything now. It couldn't be more, it couldn't be higher. We're, you know, I'm an old guy now, and I've all my life been proud to be an American, live in the freest society on earth. And now it's all coming down to it, whether we will continue to be that or become another memory like the Athens of Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. You know, you never hear about Athens from 100 years after those guys. And we could be in the same situation in the United States. They'll say, yeah, they had it good for a while. They had it all going. They had a free society, and then they threw it all away. This is what we're trying to prevent from happening.
Very true. Okay, let's take a few minutes. Robert, go ahead and tell us about your ready for pre-order coming book, Did Muhammad Exist?
Yes, glad you asked. I happen to have one right here. Did Muhammad Exist? Revised and expanded edition is about the question, did Muhammad exist? It is an exploration of the strange origins of Islam and how there's really very shaky historical evidence for the idea of this person, Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. It's a very important question. You may think, well, that's a strange, abstruse historical speculation. But I can tell you that the Islamic apologist Shabir Ali did a video supposedly refuting this book, and he says it right at the beginning. If Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never existed, this is him talking, not me, I wouldn't have said peace be upon him, then there's no point in being a Muslim. And obviously, this is something that should be a matter of interest to everyone, because if jihad terrorists thought that, then maybe they'd stop blowing us up. So this is something that I think has very important implications for the modern world. But it's also, if I do say so myself, absolutely fascinating historical study. It's very strange. People think that we know all these details about Muhammad's life, and actually virtually all of it comes from a couple hundred years after he's supposed to have died. Also in November, I have another book coming out that I'm very excited about called The Critical Quran, which is the very first Quran ever to have an honest translation in English, where it says jihad in Arabic. This book says jihad in English. Every other English translation of the Quran says strive or struggle for jihad, which is technically true, but it does not give you any idea of the military warlike aspect of the jihad, which is very clear from the Quranic text, since it's all about taking prisoners and paying a fifth of the spoils of war to the prophet and so on. It's very clear they're talking about war, but all this is ordinarily obscured in most translations. This is an honest translation with honest commentary showing what the Islamic scholars really think of each of these passages. And not only that, but Islamic apologists will tell you that the Quran is perfect, that it has never been changed, that every manuscript is exactly like every other manuscript. And that's a sign that Allah has protected it miraculously. Well, actually, there are a lot of changes in a lot of manuscripts. And this is the first Quran ever to give variant readings of different passages from other manuscripts. You will find that in Bibles, you know, where you're reading along in the Bible and there's a footnote and it says, other manuscripts say this, and they have the wording a little bit different, but there's never been a Quran that does this until now. The Critical Quran is also available for pre-order now at Amazon, and you don't want to miss that one, folks. This one is, it's gonna stir some things up.
Okay, so everybody, here's our homework. I would expect everyone by November of 2021 to have 24 books, every single one written by Robert Spencer. We're going to stop reading them. Then we're going to be, in knowing, pushing other people to read them. So maybe, just maybe, we can take our freedom back, at least from Islamists, and then we deal with Democrats. How's that plan, Robert?
Sounds great. Sign me up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, as always, Robert. We appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge, and your information and your time. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Absolutely. And for our audience who stayed with us until now, we appreciate you very much. And remember, these webinars are brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang for free. So if you'd like to sponsor these webinars, all you got to do is go to frontpagemag.com and consider making a 100% tax-deductible donation. With that being said, stay safe and goodbye.